Hello, everybody. This is Sophia Mona Lisa of the Golden Rays Center and the Roseville Mystery School. And I'm delighted to be here with you today for our second episode of the Divine Feminine Leadership for the Awakening Woman series. And I'm really excited to have here with me Karuna Devi to have this discussion around the mother wound. And before we get into our discussion, I'd like Karuna Devi to just have a moment to introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm super excited to be here and be having this conversation today. But I'm Kimberly Watipka from inherwholeness.com. And my journey towards spiritual mentorship is not just a story of personal transformation, but really a reflection of a deep-seated passion for guiding others on their path to self-discovery and empowerment. And yeah, I'm just super excited to be here with you today and having this conversation and sharing. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And so I will put a link to In Her Wholeness in the description below. But can you take a minute to tell everybody what that work is all about?
Yeah, so a lot of that work actually, again, came from my own spiritual transformation. And I really work with women in midwifing, if you will, a new way of being, a new way of walking in the world, and really being in their own wholeness as a connection to that divine feminine that we are really here to embody and express.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'd just like to take a moment to say that most of you are probably aware that I'm a high priestess in the Nicole Christine lineage, and Karuna Devi is one of my priestess sisters. So that was really exciting when we met each other and discovered that we were in the same priestess lineage.
Yeah, that was amazing. And Nicole, I'm going to say, is amazing. And I know we've both felt her with us, many times. So just a moment to say deep gratitude to her,
Yes.
and for us connecting.
Yes, absolutely. And for those of you that like to know more about Nicole Christine and about the priestess work that and the lineage that Karuna Devi and I are a part of, Nicole published a book called Under Her Wings, which
Yeah.
is a fabulous book. And I'll put
Mhm.
a link to that in the description below as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So let me go over to the slides because I want to explain to everybody how it is that we landed on this topic of the mother wound. So let me get over to the slides. Okay, so we've had our spring equinox this month, and I went to a local spring equinox celebration that had about 18 to 20 women present. And as we were going around the circle, we had been given some prompts. What are you letting go of? What is it that you're bringing in? I was fascinated by the fact that the majority of these women, and I would say very likely 90 to 95% of these women, were struggling with mother wound issues. And as they described what they were going through, they had married partners that were creating in their marriage relationship the same dynamics that they had experienced growing up between their mother and father. They had children. They were wanting to leave the marriages, but were feeling conflicted because they wanted to do what was best for the child. And we're really putting the child's or what they perceived to be the child's best interest ahead of what was their own best interest. And of course, we know the old saying, you know, you got to put the oxygen mask on first, right? Because whatever is best for the mother is going to end up being best for the child. So it was fascinating to see how this was a predominant theme amongst these women. And I even talked to them about the fact that, you know, that when you are on the spiritual path, as clearly these women are, because they showed up for this spring equinox event, you get to a point in your self-mastery where now you have to deal with the mother wound. And Karuna Devi and I even talked about the fact that, you know, Greg Braden speaks to this in his own language through his work on the 7 Essene mirrors. And the most subtle mirror, the 7th mirror, he describes as being this relationship with your parents, and how the relationship with the parents mirrors your own relationship with the Divine Mother and the Divine Father. Now, I've been through my own mother wound stuff. And of course, there's the father wound as well. When I was introduced to Greg's material on these mirrors back in 2012, I railed against this idea that what I was experiencing with my mother and father mirrored my relationship with my Divine Mother and my Divine Father, because I always felt that it was my relationship with the Divine Mother and Divine Father that was very close and was actually kind of like my, what do you call the thing that you throw out to people that are drowning?
Safety net. I know what you're.
Yeah, life preserver or
Yeah,
something to that
yeah.
effect, that to help me through those relationships. Did you experience anything growing up in terms of the mother wound, father wound dynamic?
Yeah, but you know what stands out mostly for me with that is I remember going to church, and I won't go off too far, but there I was raised Southern First Baptist. And so that right to worship the Divine Mother was taken from us so long ago that I think we see a lot of that play out in our relationships too, even with our mother and father. And I remember thinking, what are you talking about? Like, this is not what I know a mother or a father or God to be. So I don't understand, you know. And that was a huge turning point for me personally. So I feel like even if someone's not conscious of that, we play that out in our relationships because we know on some level, even if we don't have the words for it, that there is a feminine aspect of God too,
Right,
you know?
right, right. And I
But
love that you speak to that, especially in terms of even if we're not aware, because that dynamic has been embedded into the collective consciousness of humanity.
exactly.
And so, yes, even if people aren't aware that
Mm,
they're being influenced by
yeah,
that dynamic, it is in fact happening for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I spoke to Karuna Devi about my fascination with what I was witnessing at this spring equinox event, and I asked her if she would have this conversation with me on the mother wound, because she does a lot of work with the Divine Mother.
Mm,
And she said yes, of course, and we planned to do it today. And the whole beautiful synchronistic thing about us choosing today to have this discussion is that today is March 25th, and it happens to be the day of the lunar eclipse in Libra. So there couldn't be a more potent time for this conversation. More than that, this eclipse is the only lunar eclipse of all 6 eclipses in the Aries Libra eclipse season. And the reason that is significant is because the moon represents the Divine Mother. So for this to be the only lunar eclipse in a 2 years or a year and a half eclipse season is just phenomenal. And the fact that this Aries Libra eclipse season is on the path of conscious equal partnership takes it even deeper in terms of significance, because this is an opportunity in speaking to the mother wound to come into more conscious equal partnership with our own mothers and to come into more conscious equal partnership with the Divine Mother. And so from there, let's talk about this mother wound.
Yeah, yeah. And something else I want to mention about today is it was called Lady Day in the old Catholic calendar, because it represents the day that the Archangel Gabriel told Mary that she would bear Jesus.
Wow.
And March 25th, because it's 9 months to December 25th.
Right.
So, and then we know also too that within that, it really holds the pagan roots of worshiping the goddess and that rebirthing and the equinox and,
Right.
so, um, and then also what I want to say about conscious equal partnership, because when you were talking about that, I know that was uh, an intention of my own too, that we had talked about, not that long ago, but really to also bring the divine feminine and the sacred masculine in right relationship within each soul.
Yes.
So that then that ripples out to the world at
Right.
large. And that's how we heal the earth,
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it just worked out to be a beautiful day for us to be
Yeah.
having.
It's just all of these synchronistic
Yeah.
pieces that came together to have this
Yeah.
conversation today that are so potent, and which, of course, empowers this conversation
Yeah.
and will hopefully, with my own intention, be empowering for those that are listening to this conversation.
Yes. And I love that you brought up like marriage and what you were witnessing in your equinox group, because one thing that can really send us down a wrong path, what feels like a spiral, is a bad marriage,
Right.
an incorrect marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, I mean, I know that when I was walking down the aisle with my children's dad, I remember thinking, don't do it, don't do it. I had that conscious awareness of do not do this. However, all these people were there and all this money had been spent and oh my gosh, so I sort of gave myself over to caring for everyone else. I didn't want everyone else to be disappointed,
Right.
ultimately.
Right.
And that led to 20 years of self-sacrifice.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. I can feel.
Yeah, I mean, it took a long time.
Wow.
And it's in that struggle that we repeatedly do not care for ourselves. We do not put ourselves first. And especially, I think, when women are in a marriage where they know it's not the correct marriage, but they have children, all your attention sort of goes to the children.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because it's part of that patriarchal structure that we give and give and give and give, and not to, I mean, we're all here because we agreed to be here and go through this. That's my
Right.
belief anyway. And so it's within that container for a lot of women that we learn our lesson of standing on our own 2 feet, standing in our power, mothering ourselves, caring for ourselves as if we were we are divine mother represented within ourselves for ourselves. We have to be that.
Right. Absolutely. And what's interesting for me is the two perspectives that we come with, because I'm 61 years old. I've never been married. I am a mother. I have a son. He'll be 34, 35 this year. I can't keep track. And I went through my own mother wound
Yeah.
healing process, but I've never been married. So I don't have the struggle of being in a marriage, and I don't have the struggle of a mother who's having to make choices or feeling like she's having to make choices for a child that, for lack of a better word, needs to be with both parents, because
Yeah.
my son was born as into a single
Mm-hmm.
home and was always in a single parent home. And I know that there are other women out there that have a situation more like
Yeah.
mine, as opposed to like you and these women at the spring equinox circle who are in marriages. So it's beautiful that we
Yeah.
are experiencing this dynamic, but through two different lenses,
Yes.
so to speak.
And thank you for presencing that. And I feel like it's more prevalent today, maybe, than when we were growing up, but or in younger years, and maybe not. But I see a lot of women, single parent families, like most of the time, dad is rarely, if ever, involved.
Right.
So in that situation, yeah, your mom and dad,
Yes.
you
And
know.
I was in a situation where my son's father was rarely involved. And I desired for my son to have a relationship with his father. His father just simply wasn't present.
Yeah.
And his presence was more like a sleeping dragon. Like
Yeah.
whenever he would show up, it was like, oh God, goddess, now I have to put everything that we're doing on hold because he
Mm.
hasn't checked in to see is this a convenient
Oh my
time,
gosh.
and no
Yeah.
notice, right? It's today or tomorrow, because
Yeah.
I didn't want my son to miss the
Right.
opportunity to
Yeah.
have this time with his father. So it's a very tricky situation
Yeah.
to
And
navigate.
yeah, because what that brings up for me are boundaries.
Yes.
Like you sort of sell yourself out in a different way
Yes.
because you're going to drop everything. So
Right.
your child can see their dad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's still there,
Yeah. Yeah.
the giving things over and not standing in our power as women.
Right.
Um,
I love how you spoke to the patriarchal framework that we chose to come into to have these experiences of self mastery regarding reclaiming our power, because it was through patriarchy that the power of the feminine was stripped away. The knowledge of the divine feminine was suppressed. And so, of course, we would have to come into the depths of the darkness of patriarchy to reclaim it. How could we reclaim it any place else except for in the space from which it was taken from us?
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, initiations happen in that cave, in that dark womb space,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
and we really, especially as women that feel called to teach and lead, have to be willing to go into that dark space to receive what is there for us.
that's right.
Um, and I want to share a little bit about um, Divine Mother and our mother's womb, because for us to be here on the earthly plane, we had to have an earthly mother. And our womb, there's still a thread to our earthly mother. And then we have our own thread to Divine Mother, but we also have a thread to Divine Mother through our earthly mother. And one process, it sounds simple, that I share is to have a picture of your mother where you can see her eyes and really connect to her. And every morning, 5-10 minutes, thank you. I love you. Forgive me,
Right,
until you feel your heart soften.
right, right.
And I mean, people would not believe, women cannot believe the difference that comes from healing, if you will, that thread
Yes,
that
yeah,
goes through the earthly mother to Divine Mother. And what that brings up for me too is how we can't just go straight to the divine. We are in a body for a reason, and we have to fully inhabit that body. And I think that's what our connection to the earthly mother can also give us,
yes,
that feeling of being connected to the earth.
right. That's exactly right. Yes, you're absolutely right. We've come into these physical bodies for self mastery.
Mm.
We cannot have self mastery unless we're in these physical bodies,
Yeah.
which goes back to the scriptural saying of being in the world, but not
Yeah.
of the world.
Mm.
All of our self mastery has to be here in the world, which includes the mastery of the world. And until we can do that, we're not able to ascend into our light garments, into our higher
Mass
self.
self. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very well said. Something came in for me, but oh, it went away. That's a postmenopausal brain for you. But I think one thing I was thinking, but the four archetypes that we as women sort of cycle through, talking about menopause: mother, maiden, queen, and crone, or hag. I personally like the word hag. I just really do. I do.
I use wise woman.
And I like wise woman, but we cycle through all of those, not just in spans of years, but in days, hours, in minutes, we could be in either of those phases. Just like being a mother and needing to midwife a new reality for yourself. Well, that takes you back to the maiden stage,
Yes. Yes.
you know?
I love that you're talking about how we continuously cycle through them and that there are actually cycles within cycles when we're
Yes.
experiencing that in terms of different out picturing of what we're engaged with. Because I personally, with my own mother wound issue, encountered that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I had my own mother wound from when I was being raised by my mother. At the time that I had my son, I had been disowned by my
Mm,
mother,
mm,
and had that breach had been in place 2 or 3 years. I don't remember which.
mm,
Um, so I give birth to my son
mhm.
alone, but
Uh,
meanwhile, unbeknownst to me, my roommate took it upon herself to reach out to my mother to let her know I was getting ready to have, you know, this baby because she felt like my family should be involved without
oh,
knowing any of
yeah.
the
Did your
drama.
mother know you were pregnant when
No, they
oh,
nobody, because I had been disowned from the
oh,
family to such an extent that a cousin of mine told me that he was going to go visit her, and from South Florida to where they live would be going by me, where I lived in Central Florida. And she told him, if you stop to see her on the way, don't even bother coming here. So the whole family had
oh,
been put on notice that they
yeah.
too would be disowned.
Wow.
Yeah. So this roommate informs them, and without my permission, without my knowledge.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, I get contacted uh, by my family because it wasn't about healing the relationship with me. It
Mm.
was about wanting to have a relationship with the baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, fast forward after all of that shaming took place, because
Yeah.
even though I was 26, I was a
Yeah.
single woman, and,
Yeah.
you know, that wasn't,
Right.
yeah. As I was raising my son, because I was a single mother and because the father was predominantly absent, my mother began to usurp the mother role with my son.
Oh.
And so here I was in this mother maiden.
Yeah, having to really almost fight for your
Yes,
position as
yes,
a mother. Yeah.
yes, because my authority as a mother was continuously being undermined.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a great segue to have helped me remember what I was going to say. And we as mothers, and I know there are plenty of things personally in retrospect that I wish I would have done different. There's
hmm,
a lot of things I wish I would have known
right.
about myself and about my children when I was raising them, but I
Yes,
didn't. And our mothers came in with mother wounds. Our
yes,
grandmothers came in with their own mother wounds.
yes, it's an ancestral lineage
Yes. So there's
issue.
this long line.
Hmm.
And I would venture to say that any of us, if we sat down and wrote down, mother, grandmother, great grandmother, great great grandmother, and what we know about them, there's probably links to each and every one of those.
Yes, yes. And in fact, speaking to that, my grandmother, my mother's mother, while she was married, she got divorced when my mother and her siblings were very young, like under 3,
Yeah. And
which
that,
back then in the 40s was
yeah.
unheard of.
Yeah.
And so she essentially raised her children as a single woman, as
As
a
a
single
single
mother.
mom. Wow. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it?
And it actually even goes back to my great grandmother, my grandmother's mother. So
Okay.
we're talking, in the 1920s.
Yeah.
Um, I was always told that they were divorced, which again, back then in the 20s would have
Yeah.
been
That would have
unheard of.
been right.
As a genealogist, I've never seen any documented evidence,
Yeah.
but my great grandfather did go and live with another woman. And so something happened there. And so even my great grandmother ended up being a
Yeah.
single mother of 4 children.
And at that time, I don't know, did they really have to make it official? Because it's not going to be documented anywhere that, you know, it's not like there's an online database of officially being divorced or.
Right. Well, I mean, you would have to go through the court system in order for it to be documented. And I don't think that they did because I can't find anything. But he
Yeah.
did
Just,
basically abandon the family and go
yeah.
live with another woman whom he called his wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So,
looking at the lineage, it's
yeah.
interesting to see how these dynamics come through the lineage. And this was the thing, pardon me just a minute.
Oh, sure.
This is the thing that these women at the spring equinox circle were had this heightened awareness of. They did not want to teach their children to
Yes.
be in relationship the way that they had been taught by their mothers.
Yeah.
And I did speak to them about, the seventh mirror. I
Yeah.
did speak to them about this opportunity for mastery. And I did speak to them about the opportunity for the ancestral lineage healing that
Yeah.
happens when we can heal the mother wound. It heals the ancestral lineage all the way back. More importantly, it heals it forward for
Yes.
all future generations.
Yeah. And that healing is so, like, I really believe that we have to not just go to that healing in the mind. We really have to feel, where is that actually being housed in my DNA? Because a lot of things, if you just give them awareness, that's all they wanted. And I think the worst thing, like, I'm going to cry, the worst thing for a mother or a grandmother, even. And so I would venture to say the worst thing for our ancestors to see is us repeating a pattern that they know doesn't serve. And
Yeah.
I just find it such deep, profound healing work.
Yes.
In, not just for ourselves,
Yes.
to
Absolutely.
really work with that mother wound and go deep into what, not just, oh, I'm healing my mother wound. Okay, what about your mother wound? Your maternal line, what specifically needs healing? Is
Right.
it abandonment? Is it giving away your power? Is it, any number of things?
Exactly.
But I think what brought that up for me is you talking about those women. And I remember distinctly that gut wrenching feeling of like daily making the decision to stay and then getting so physically sick and realizing like an epiphany, oh, I'm teaching my daughters that this is a relationship.
Right.
I got to get out,
Right.
you
And
know?
this is exactly the kind of epiphany these women were having.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I know it is.
They didn't know how to save themselves. They were so focused on saving the child that they couldn't see that it came back to saving themselves, because we haven't been taught how to save ourselves, because
Right.
saving ourselves is stepping into our power. It's
Yeah.
setting a boundary.
And again, those patriarchal structures that were put in place, not blaming men, you know, at all. That's not what it's about. The patriarchal structures that stripped the feminine from every single thing and basically made women property.
Yes. And let me speak to that, because these are young women.
Mhm.
They don't really have, probably for the most part, there may be some, so I don't want to put a blanket statement out there, but for the most part, they probably are unaware of what's transpired with women in earlier generations.
Yeah.
But it was not that long ago. It was in the 70s, still, when women could not even have their own bank account
Yes.
without their husband signing on it if they were married, or their father signing on it if they were unmarried.
Hmm.
The 70s,
Yeah.
50 some years ago.
Well, do you know, still today, there will be certain things that my husband's name is on, but I pay the bills. And a lot of things, like he has had to give them permission to speak with me.
Yes, because your name is not on the account. And I had that discussion with my mother, and every woman out there needs to know that, God forbid, your husband make his transition and
Yeah.
your name is not on the deed of your house, or on your power bill,
Yeah.
or your, you
Yeah.
know,
Credit
phone
card,
bill, credit
anything.
cards.
Yeah.
You are, pardon my French,
Screwed. Yes.
you
Yeah.
need to get your name on everything
Yeah. I had
now.
a friend lose her husband, and I mean, that I learned because it was a mess for her to try. And it wasn't about keeping all her stuff. It was the hoops she had to jump through. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I think we're hopefully, but anyway, it's not where the state or anybody was trying to take anything. It was just all the hoops jumping through
And
to
all
get
of that you're describing has been set up through the patriarchal system
Mhm.
to disempower women.
Yes, and I think it goes completely back to, and maybe before, what I hear people call the witch wound, where women specifically lost money, property, homes, a certain group would want what she had. And so she would be labeled so that they could take all of her stuff. I mean, it's been a lot, and
It's deep and it's insidious. And
yes,
so while it looks like you've got this struggle with your mother,
yes,
right? Related to the things that you experienced in your childhood.
Yeah.
It's so much deeper. It's so much more insidious. And this is why the
Sure.
healing is important, not only for your entire lineage, not only for you, but the healing brings light to all of those insidious octopus legs that
Yeah.
are a part of the patriarchal system.
And, talking about lineage too, we haven't been taught probably for thousands of years on a deep level how much power we as women yield, or I should say, wield for when we pray or petition for our children, for anything that we are midwifing, the power that we as women hold to give birth to something or someone and to pray for its thriving. I don't think we've been taught that for a long, long time.
No, and this goes back to reclaiming power.
Yeah.
And for these women that were at the spring equinox ceremony, by making the choice to leave the dysfunctional marriage, is the first step in
Yeah.
reclaiming power.
And I just want to give a huge shout out to any woman that comes to that realization, makes that decision, and takes that first step. And I want to say personally, you might take one step forward and two steps back. And then you take another step, and you may take two more steps back again, but you keep trying.
That's right. That's exactly right.
We all can do hard things. And for some reason, it feels so hard. And I think because we've been impressed upon to forsake ourselves.
Yes. 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 I wasn't in a marriage, as I mentioned. And because my mother, primarily, both parents had usurped my authority as the parent, I had to stand in my power and take that authority back.
Mm.
And the way that I chose to do it, because at the time I couldn't see any other way,
Mm.
because we lived in the same community. Half of my son's stuff was at their house. Half
Mm.
of his son was at my house.
Yeah.
He didn't know,
Right.
you know, who who's in
Yeah.
charge here. And
Yeah.
that became an issue later when he
Yeah.
was in college, which I had to address with
Yeah.
him. Look, yes, maybe you were staying with them on occasion because I needed help because I was a single parent
Yes.
and I had to travel for my job.
Yeah.
But I never signed them over to you. The most that
Yeah.
they had was a paper saying if you needed medical help
Right.
assistance, they could provide it, but they were never given.
Yeah.
You were never given over to them. So what I had to do was I found a home in a different community,
Mhm.
about a half hour or so away. And I had to go to my parents' house and take all his belongings with me
Yeah.
to set a clear
Boundary.
boundary.
Yeah.
And of course, they freaking flipped out.
Yeah.
When were you going to tell us? Who are you to make the decision? And I said, I'm
His
telling you now.
his mom.
And so that was, you know, I was raised in a family where the parents were always right. You did not question. When
Yeah.
they said jump, you said how high.
Yeah.
So for me to go into their home and take my son's belongings and say, we're
Yeah.
leaving,
Yeah.
that was huge for me.
Yeah. And, you know, I think both of us were still raised at a time where children were to be seen and not heard.
In the South, you know what they call that?
What?
Play purdy. Play
Oh,
purdy, which meant sit there, shut up,
yes.
don't break a sweat and get dirty.
Yeah. 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 I will say my grandparents always used to uh, uh, well, let me say this. It's very different being a grandparent than it is being a mother.
Well, and let me say, this is another unique perspective that you bring because I haven't been blessed to be a grandmother yet. So please share.
Well, as a mother, for some reason, we take on whether our children are being perfect or not on some level. As a grandmother, it's very different. Like you can't, you have no preconceived notions about what they should be doing, who they should be, or you just love them. And it always brings me to something that somebody told me when my kids were young, and I never got it. I never understood it. But they said, you have to love them like they're somebody else's. Meaning, don't be so wrapped up and attached to what they do when they get older or who they're being in every single moment. Just let them be, you know,
Yeah.
they're going to figure it out. I never understood that. I never, unfortunately, I never understood that when I was younger. And so to have grandkids, and it's so funny because you've never had a daughter.
No.
I've never had a son, but I have grandsons. And it's like, wow, it's just so different. And it opens your heart up in a completely different way.
Yes.
And it's, I don't know, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Just a probably for me, the most beautiful thing that I've ever experienced. And for someone that doesn't have kids, or is thinking of having kids and you're worried, you have a baby and you can't imagine how much your heart grows. And then you want to have a second one. And it's like, but I don't think I can love another one. Like I love that. I can't, there's no way, there's no room in my heart. And then you have another one and your heart grows that much bigger.
Right. Right.
And it's truly the most beautiful thing. And I think as women, it doesn't have to be a child.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a child,
Mm-hmm.
but there is more than likely something that is wanting to be birthed
Right.
through you in some way. It might
Right.
be art, it might be your writing, you know,
Yeah.
and it might be CEO of some big conglomerate, you know, who knows?
Right. Right.
But that's your expression of the
Right.
divine mother.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I'd like to talk about the healing of the mother wound process
Mhm.
because it will be unique for each woman. And, we're talking about women, but let me just take the time here to say men experience a
Yeah.
mother wound and a father wound in their own unique way as well. So the healing process will be unique and it will take however long it will take. And I think it's important for women that are consciously choosing to engage the healing of the mother wound process
Mhm.
to hear how other women have been able to do this. Not that it will be the way that they would or should or could do it.
Mm.
It just opens the space by hearing how someone else has done it
Mm.
to allow your own guidance to come
Yeah.
through it. Somehow, by hearing somebody else's story, it provides permission for that guidance to come through,
Yeah.
from my perspective. And I was one who was born as an extremely introspective person. So
Mm.
it weighed on me
Yeah.
in ways I cannot describe, this mother wound. And of course, continuously projecting and blaming, judging and criticizing my mother for all the reasons this wound existed, because
Yeah.
I didn't understand at the time that I had created those experiences,
Hmm. Yes.
and that I had chosen my mother to have those experiences for my own self mastery.
Yeah.
So I was kind of fighting myself in this paper bag around, you did this to me, in a kind of an indignant way, like, why can't you apologize? Why can't you even
Yeah.
own up? Yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's the egoic mind
Yeah.
trying to justify all of your thoughts and feelings that it's creating around the wound.
Because if you give yourself forgiveness and compassion, then the ego has no hold.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's not going to give up its hold without
Right.
a fight. And it will trick you, it will delude you in ways that you can't even fathom.
Yes.
So the way that I finally was able to make peace
Mm-hmm.
with the wound, that for me was the first step, not the healing. I had to make peace with it in
Yeah.
order for the healing to unfold. Was I realized the things I just said. Okay, this is for my own self mastery. I've created this reality.
Yeah.
And so my mother, at the soul level, agreed to play her role for me.
Yes. Yeah.
And in order to play that role, which I had labeled as so wicked, right? The wicked
Yeah.
witch
Yeah.
archetype, she must have really, really loved me
Yes.
to agree to play that role so that I could have that mastery.
Yeah.
And that was the first piece for me, to make peace
Yeah.
with the wounding I had experienced.
Yeah.
And then from there, I thought, okay, how can I be in relationship with her from
Mm.
this place?
Yeah.
And someone had once said to me, why can't we agree to only talk about the things that we agree on? Why talk about things that you don't agree on, which causes conflict?
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, okay, what do my mother and I have in common? Which was a hard contemplative question, because for most of my life, I would tell people, if it weren't for the fact that people have been telling me all my life that this woman is my mother, I wouldn't know that
Yeah.
she's my mother. So to try
Yeah.
to find some common ground with her was really a hard place for me to dive into and discover. And
Yeah.
then the obvious apparent answer was, the one thing we had in common is my son.
Mm. And he came in for her to be his grandmother
Yes.
as much as you his mother. Yes.
Yes. Yes. And
Mm.
their dynamic
Yeah.
that didn't include me
Yeah.
was a part of my self mastery as well.
Yeah.
And so I chose, and this is how you stand in your power. You make a conscious choice.
Yeah.
I chose to be in relationship with my mother and to have it based on our relationships with my son,
Mm.
because that's what we could agree on. We
Yeah.
both love him deeply. We're both care about his well-being. And so we can talk about that and
Yeah.
what he's doing and what he's creating in his own
Yeah.
life. And we can bond over that.
Yeah.
And doing that, consciously choosing to do that, and then the process of developing that kind of a relationship is what helped me to heal the mother wound.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how, because you have a brother and a sister,
Yes.
it's funny how children raised in the same household, and I'm just talking about my children and then me, my brother and sister, everyone is affected differently
Yes.
by the exact same thing.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm just going to bring this in for a second. I have a Pisces moon. Everything that someone says on, I've had to work consciously to not be affected by the words that people use. Because if I take the inflection or and make it the intention, like that's just what my heart does, and it hurts, and it would have nothing to do with me.
Well, and I love that you speak to your Pisces moon and how you experience it, because I have a Cancer moon.
Mm,
Pisces and Cancer are water.
yeah.
Cancer is ruled by the moon. This
And you,
is all about the mother energy, and
yes,
it taps us into the mother wound archetype
yes,
for humanity,
from the beginning.
which is why we experience it in a magnified, amplified way within
Yes.
us.
And I would say, because this is one way that I have worked with the ancestral piece of the mother wound. Like my mom was very young when she had me. And she, on some level, I feel like we kind of grew up together, more like sisters in a way than mom and daughter. And so to be as young as she was in the mid 60s, I had a lot of fear and shame that came from actually past my mom, that she took on from my grandmother, that she took on from my great grandmother, you know? And I want to say that I don't, this work, it can seem daunting to start, but what is also daunting is to start and think you got to a certain point and you're done.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, another, like, it's literally like peeling back the layers of an onion, you know,
Yes.
and to give yourself the space to really take on that initiation of each layer. The gifts are so much more. They become so much more tangible with every layer that you peel back. And those are the pieces that I've worked with, really being in that cave of initiation. I do a lot of work with the holy womb chakra, not necessarily our physical womb chakra, but the holy womb chakra, and with Divine Mother. But then there came a time where I almost felt like even with that, it was spiritual bypassing, because I wasn't paying attention to my body. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia 20 some odd years ago. And so my body had something to tell me, but I wasn't listening. It took
Well, this is something
years.
we have in common. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia 40 years ago,
Wow. And
and
then
I
how?
had suffered from it through my entire childhood, which is rare. Most people get it
Mm,
because of an accident or the loss of a parent.
stress, chronic stress. And I think that's why there's so many more women being diagnosed and having been diagnosed with fibromyalgia because of that self-sacrificing.
Yes. And as you're saying this, this is giving me a whole new lens around this suffering, because let me tell you, the pain in my body that I
Mm.
have suffered through has been so intense. I mean, there were times when I was traveling for work, I would be in such excruciating pain from the top of my head to the tip of my toe
Yeah.
that I would pray for the plane to go down so I could no longer be in pain. And of
Wow.
course, it was the flare ups of the fibromyalgia from all
Yeah.
that I was being required to do in that job.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yes.
seeing now the correlation
Yeah.
between the mother wound and it's manifesting in the body as fibromyalgia. And I never made that connection before.
Well, and yeah, that the denial of ourselves. And I forget what the book is. It's big in Europe, but it's about certain things, excuse me, and what they represent. And fibromyalgia is disempowerment.
Wow.
It's undervaluing oneself and deep depressive feelings, not wanting to do something, but having to.
Right. Right. And I will tell you, I came into this world. My mother will tell you, I was defiant. I had to do this, I had to do that, but I was defiant. I mean, at the age of 5, when she told me,
Yeah.
get used to vacuuming, you're going to be vacuuming for the rest of your life, I threw the vacuum down and said, I am not going to do it.
Yeah. I was the same way. I remember having to fold laundry and being told to turn the clothes right side out. And I'm like, no, if you want it right side out, turn it right side out when you take it off. Why do I have to turn it right side out for you? But for me, I feel like it was in the younger years, it was more about questioning. Like, I want to understand. Yeah, I'll help you if I have buy in,
Mhm,
or yeah, I'll do what you're asking me to do, but I need to know why.
mhm, mhm.
I have to understand. And at that wasn't the time in
Right.
our period
It
for a
wasn't acceptable. I'm
to
the
be asked
parent,
that
you're the
question.
child, do what
Yeah.
I say. Yep. Yep. I know.
Oh
I
God.
know. I know.
Yeah,
So
you have to
I'm
learn
sure you've had your own mother wound issues. How were you able to come to a healing place? Or is it something you're still working on?
Oh, well, I don't think we ever end, honestly. I think the biggest thing for me is my mom was very young, and my grandparents were like parents to me. And I know it had to have hurt my mom's feelings, but when when we left there, they just assumed she was going to leave me with them, you know?
Sounds like she experienced what I experienced.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking when you were saying that. And of course, uh, there were always things said when I was younger too. And I don't know. I've had to do a lot of my own work around the shame and the fear. And I think a lot of that just came in with, again, that matriarchal lineage
Mm-hmm.
line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I think there's just so to really stand on my own 2 feet too. And my grandmother was very young. Well, I didn't have my first baby until I was 23. And I really wanted my life to be different, but that doesn't mean I made good choices.
Right. Well, and this is another part of the healing process, Karuna Devi, is to allow yourself and your mother the grace to
Yes.
know that at any given moment, we are doing the very best we
Yeah.
know how to do, and that
Yeah.
we are able to do, even if we know better. Does it, it's just like with exercise. Some days you can exercise at 80%, some days you can only exercise at 60%. We've got to create the space for the grace.
Yeah. It's beautifully said. Yes. So, you know, I started with what I mentioned, the just gazing into a picture of my mother, her eyes. And then I got to a place where, and I can talk to her about it, but some things I just feel like I don't like, there's just no need to dredge it all up. It was so long ago, but I go back to her being that 15-year-old girl and just holding her hands and telling her, we did it. We made it.
Right, right,
And it's not a train wreck. It's
right,
beautiful.
right. And this speaks to the spiritual maturity that unfolds as we go through the various stages of our
Yes.
life. Because where you are now as a mother and a grandmother, you
Yeah.
know what it's like to be a 15-year-old girl. We
Yeah,
don't really register that when we're
exactly.
15 ourselves. But
No.
as a mother and a
Yeah.
grandmother, you
Yes.
now have the spiritual maturity and perspective to see, oh my gosh, this is what my mother very
Yeah.
likely went through. And that in itself is extending grace,
Yes.
mercy, compassion to her.
Yes. And at 20 years old, I did not have that maturity.
Exactly.
I was going to be different. I was going to do everything different. And um and I probably went to extremes. There are a lot of things that I ended up doing exactly the same. And then the things that I did different, I probably went to extremes in an effort to be nothing like.
I love that you mentioned that because that's exactly what happened with my mother. Her mother, single mother, she was a nurse. She worked nights in the emergency room. So my mother and her brother and sister were like feral kids,
Yeah.
right? Anything
Yeah.
went because the mother wasn't present.
Yeah.
And so she did exactly the opposite.
Yes.
It was too many rules, too
Mhm.
restrictive of rules, too much oversight. You couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
So, this is also a natural inclination that can happen as a
Yeah.
parent when
Yes.
you're desiring to choose something different.
And that is another way that the mother wound shows its face,
Yes,
right? To mentally be saying to yourself, either A, I want to be just like, or B, I want to be nothing like in whatever, it could be numerous things. Maybe your mom didn't cook and you want to make sure your kids get a home cooked meal,
right,
or maybe you weren't allowed to ask questions and you allow an open floor, and my kids laugh because we had a talking stick, and whatever it was, they could say there, because I had three daughters, and when you get three girls talking, three teenage girls talking all at one time, you don't even know where to look or what to do.
right, right.
And their big joke is, well, I first say I always wanted my daughters to think for themselves. Don't believe anything anybody says. It's not that you can't trust them. I want you to trust yourself. I want you to have a voice. And sometimes, we joke, I did my job a little too well because they don't always listen. But it's okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all good.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. Well, and I love how you said that you wanted them to have a voice,
Mhm.
because the sacred feminine on this planet and through the women on this planet for so long has had no voice. It's been silenced.
Yeah.
And so, even talking about acknowledging that there is a mother wound
Yeah.
is a huge part of restoring
The
your
voice.
voice. Yes.
Yes. And a big part of the religious wounding, because I will say I shared a little bit in the beginning about going to a Southern First Baptist church, and mother was nowhere in there, really, and God is pissed, and you're a sinner and you're gonna burn. And that was tough for, like, me, again, feeling everything. That was a lot of anger from somebody that's supposed to love us. What? I don't understand, you know? And so I, my kids were raised going to church, but then after, oh, it's so funny this is coming up because I never really thought about this piece in retrospect. But then after I got them through church and to a certain age, I was done. Like, I can't handle all that. Like, I I don't even believe all the anger that you're throwing. I don't get it.
Right.
And I went down several paths. Again, I researched my ancestry, became a druid, I became a vulva, I, did all of these things. I became a Creabon through self-realization fellowship, and multiple spiritual paths, again, in my quest to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was part of my purpose, my mission was,
Right.
like, I had to rediscover the feminine for myself,
Mm-hmm.
and what that meant and what that truly looked like, a from a heavenly perspective, but B, how do I bring that to the earthly, to my own body, to my own relations? Like, what does that look like?
Right.
'Cause you can't be here all the time, but you can't be here all the time.
Right. And of course, as priestesses, we understand the oh, I'm just losing the word here. It comes from the Hermetic teaching of as above, so below, as
Alchemy.
within,
Yeah.
so without. So, of course, this was
Yeah.
an intrinsic part
Yeah.
of your self discovery and self mastery.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say my priestess years were probably the most transformative years.
For me as well.
Yeah. And even though at the time it was seemed hard, it's one of those things you look back on. It's like birthing a child. You
It
don't
is.
remember the pain, you know?
Right.
Still it becomes one of the most beautiful things.
Yes, because for those listening, and especially in reference to this analogy, when you go through a priestess process like we did, what you're birthing is your inner priestess.
Yes.
And then when you go into the high priestess process, you're birthing your inner high priestess. So
Yes.
it's very much a unified,
Mm-hmm.
holistic
Yeah.
uh, consciousness, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah. I agree. I agree 100%. And it's something I call, who I call the modern holy woman. And I know several people were like, oh, you're going to put too many women off by saying modern holy woman. And I understand that on some level. But what I hope to convey, what is my deepest wish to convey is that you can live the ideal life for yourself walking the earth. Like, we live and work in the here and now.
Right.
And regardless of cultural or spiritual background, she simply seeks, and seek is a strong word for me, seeks to really embody and live her spiritual values.
Yes.
That's all it is. It doesn't mean holier than thou.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you're not married and you just give yourself to the divine. No, no. You
This
give
goes
yourself
back to,
life. You give
yes,
yourself to life.
yes, this goes back to being in the world, but not of the world.
Yes.
And one of the powerful I am statements
Mm.
coming from the Saint Germain I am teachings is I am holy, pure, and perfect.
In every moment. Yes. I love that.
Yeah. Well, this has been a beautiful conversation. And before we wrap things up, speaking of the I am teachings, which we have delved into now through the Galactic New Earth Project and our Venus synodic cycle activations. After the spring equinox event, where I had that really incredible experience with those women, let me go back to the slides here. I discovered while I was reading this book, I Am the Open Door, Ascended Master Discourses, that one of the discourses, number 12, that was brought through by the Ascended Master Godfrey Ray King, was actually speaking to this idea of this struggle with our parents. And I was flabbergasted that I had just had this experience with those women. And now, on the heels of that, I'm reading this discourse. And so, briefly, what Godfrey Ray King says is let us talk for a moment about a condition that I know is troubling many of you, and that is the appalling relationship that some of you have with your dear parents. This is something that must be rectified if you are to advance. And let me just clarify here that when he's talking about advancing, he's talking about this ascension process. Although you may have had to go through seemingly unendurable hardships on each other's accounts, meaning parent and child, learn to be as kind as you can and try to get along. For to learn to manifest harmony always and under the most adverse conditions is one of the greatest lessons and tests that you will ever have to undergo. Though you may have advanced very far along the path, you could not have done so without your parents, and there is much more you have still to learn from them. So this was a huge aha for me, because I know for myself, being a naturally introspective person, one of my questions is, okay, I created this situation for myself. Why am I having this experience? Right? To understand now that the mother wound and the father wound is about our self mastery in terms of being able to manifest harmony always and under the most adverse conditions, because that's the mastery piece, was a huge realization for me. What's coming up for you, Karuna Devi, around all of that?
Yeah, so I love that last part. Much you still have to learn from them because I feel like at this point, every time I'm with my parents, I see something different and learn something different. And funny thing, I work with Mother Mary as a representation of Divine Mother a lot as well. And my dad is Catholic and my mom was Baptist. And so she would not agree to raise us Catholic. And so they didn't go to church. We went with neighbors. And at this point, it's taken me a long time to kind of come back, not to the church in a sense, but to what speaks to me in the current religious teachings of today. And I'm wanting to learn the rosary.
Yes.
And so, like, when we complete our time today, I'm going to my dad so he can show me how to pray the rosary.
Wow.
And there was a time that I never would have asked him for that. Two
Mm-hmm.
reasons. One, because I didn't want to know, because it was related to what I felt like an institution that not only took our power, took Mother Mary's power,
Yes.
honestly.
Yes.
And and so and then I wouldn't have wanted to ask him,
Right.
you know, to help me, period, anyway.
Right. Because I think that there's probably this kind of programming in the collective that why would you go to a man to ask him about the divine feminine?
And that has come up for me. It's like, oh, wow, this is kind of cool that I'm asking my dad to show me how to pray the rosary.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that, it's a good place to be.
Yeah. And for those of you out there that aren't aware of the encoded mysteries in the rosary, the fact that it's even called the
Yeah,
rosary
a rose
is
garden.
the rose is a very, very ancient symbol for the sacred feminine. And the reason it's such an ancient symbol for the sacred feminine is because the luminary body known as Venus, which represents the sacred feminine, in her 8-year cycle traces a pentagram in the sky that looks like a rose.
Yeah. And do you know, if I'm not mistaken, seems like the rose is the very first plant, if you will, that we have written record of.
Wow.
It seems like I read that somewhere. I can't swear that that's true, but I liked the idea of it for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And for those of you that connect with Mary Magdalene, you'll notice that most images of her include the rose.
Yeah.
And in fact, this just popped into my mind, so I'm going to say it. If any of you watched the very first Da Vinci Code movie, you will remember that where the sarcophagus of Mary Magdalene was supposed to be, or where it had been under Roslyn Chapel,
Uh-huh.
there was a vase with a rose.
Oh, really? I didn't
And
remember that.
yes, and then when he finds the sarcophagus underneath the Louvre,
Yeah.
at her sarcophagus there is also a vase with a rose.
Wow. I didn't remember that.
Yeah, yeah. So what's interesting about this discourse from Godfrey Ray King is that further on, he gives us a remedy, which I love. He gives us a remedy for, although he doesn't use these exact same words, healing the mother wound. He says, call the law of forgiveness and fire of forgiveness into action to consume all human discord, all humanly created resentment, doubt, fear, and all wrongly qualified energy of the past that has been causing you to see only the outside of each other. And by that, he means the personality of each other rather than the true Christ selves, the one. And so when I read this, I'm like, okay, there's the remedy. But how do you put that into action? How do you practice that? Because again, my mind is constantly going into deeper and deeper contemplation. Well, because my mind asked the question, of course, the answer was provided to me. And so just recently, these two books were brought before me. I Am the Violet Tara, Goddess of Forgiveness and Freedom. I Am the Violet Tara in Action, Lessons in Mastery. And these books are written by Peter Mount Shasta, who is a phenomenal teacher of Saint Germain's I Am teachings. And in I Am the Violet Tara, he says, Violet Tara is a manifestation of the Divine Mother. And like Karuna Devi, from childhood, I had always connected with Mother Mary as an aspect of the Divine Mother. It is important to understand that in other religions and other cultures, there are other aspects of the Divine Mother. In the Buddhist tradition, Violet Tara is one of the aspects of the Divine Mother. And Peter says, by consciously invoking the Violet Tara into action, you begin to manifest her qualities of forgiveness and compassion and achieve your own self-mastery and freedom. It will also release the activity of the violet consuming flame to purify humanity. And so why is that significant? Because we're not only purifying ourselves and our lineage, healing ourselves in our lineage, but now we are doing this work on behalf of humanity by purifying the collective consciousness of humanity of this mother wound. And so for those of you that would like to start to consciously engage this healing process, I highly encourage these two books for you to read and to work with. I don't receive any remuneration by the books that I recommend, but if you're feeling that yes in your heart, I highly encourage you to do so. So Karuna Devi, I know you're somewhat familiar with Violet Tara. What's coming up in you around the power and the gift that she's bestowing upon us?
Yeah, so for me, what was coming up is sort of back to the chalice and the blade, in a sense that when we can purify and heal not just ourselves, but the world at large, that is when the earth heals as well. And that chalice and that blade is really the divine feminine and the sacred masculine first within each of us individually.
Yes, yes. Which brings us back to today's lunar eclipse in Libra. Libra is all about harmony, right? The whole reason we have these mother wound experiences to master manifesting harmony in the most adverse conditions. Today's Libra moon, divine mother moon, is about harmony on that path of conscious equal partnership, coming into conscious equal partnership with our mother, our parents, coming into conscious equal partnership with our divine mother above and the divine mother within.
Yes.
Just incredible synchronicities, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely wild. I love our conversations. And then the fact that, we didn't plan. We planned today without understanding what all was going on,
Right,
today.
right.
And so, yeah, just a beautiful synchronicity and a conversation, I think, much needed for so many, not just women, because there are keepers of the sacred blade as
Yes,
well, if I can put it that way. But I feel like the story of empowerment is one that so many women need to hear. And really, that empowerment heals not just ourselves, but like we were saying, you can
yes,
work with that whole matriarchal lineage. And what a different world it will be for our grandchildren and great grandchildren, or nieces and nephews, and etc.
yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I too want to say we had planned unwittingly to
Yes.
do the conversation today. We had discussed the topic, but the whole conversation has been spontaneously authentic. We
Yes.
didn't give ourselves an outline.
No, not at all. And that's what I love about our conversations. We've always said we should record these.
Yeah, yeah, because so much wisdom comes through uh,
Yeah,
as
really.
we're having these conversations in a very conscious way that allows the space for the wisdom to come through. And you're right, the the timing for this was so apparent to me when I sat in that circle with those
Mhm.
women. I could feel it was a deep yearning for understanding and healing that they were desiring around these very unique situations they had manifested for themselves related to this mother wound. So,
Yeah. And I just want to acknowledge, because I don't think that this particular phrasing came up, but to the psyche, that feels like a death. It feels like you're gonna die. It's like you're running from a tiger.
right,
That is literally what that decision feels like.
right. I love that you say that because it reminds me of the scripture of the camel going through the
The
eye of the needle.
Yes,
That's
yes,
what it is.
yes. And it's like being birthed,
Yep.
you know, whole new life on the other side. It's just you got to get through it, you
Yep.
know.
That's right. Well, do you have any final words to kind of sum up this topic, this conversation that you'd like to share before we close it?
I think just if I had one wish for any woman going through that is to just, even if you send yourself love and forgiveness and compassion,
Yes.
start there. You don't even have to look at a picture of your mother.
Yeah.
Start with yourself first.
You always have to start with yourself. It goes back to putting the oxygen mask on first.
Because I know for myself in that situation, I knew I had betrayed myself.
Yeah.
And to first give myself that love and forgiveness and compassion, and knowing that I, I did what I knew in that
Right.
moment. I did the best I could in that moment.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And
Yeah.
just the love and compassion for yourself is first and foremost.
Absolutely. And I'd like to say that allow yourself the consciousness for what the actual feelings are that are coming up within you related
Yeah.
to the mother wound.
Yeah.
For Karuna Devi, she speaks about the feeling of betrayal, betraying herself. She speaks about the feelings of shame and was it
Fear.
fear?
Mm-hmm.
For me, my experience was the experience of having my authority usurped
Mm-hmm.
and also being made invisible.
Yeah.
And so each of us that have these experiences have unique feelings around the experience that also need to be identified and recognized as a part of the healing experience. It's going to be different for everybody.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. Yeah, thank you. Beautifully said. And I think that you'll find when you can name something, you will, and you feel into it, you will find it in the body.
Yes,
And just that acknowledgement is a huge leap toward healing that.
yes. I always say that the awareness heightening is the first big step.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Karuna
Thank
Devi,
you
for
so
being
much.
here for this
Absolutely
conversation, for
beautiful.
all the wisdom you've shared.
I loved it. Thank you so, so much.
I did. Thank you. Until our next episode, which will be coming out in about 2 months. That's my schedule every 2 months. Um, take care and many blessings to you. Bye bye.